I've been digging deep, reading tons of reviews from way back in the early days of TV right up to today. I've looked through newspapers, magazines and online review sites. In this video I'm going to share the 5 sitcoms that, according to both public and the critics, were just not funny. I'll be counting them down in the order they first aired, so get ready for some laughs, or maybe not. The ITV sitcom Babes in the Wood ran for 2 series from 1998 until 1999. The babes of the title are 3 attractive young women: Denise Van Outen, Natalie Walter and Samantha Janus in Series 1, with Madeline Curtis in Series 2. And the wood is St John's Wood, one of London's most affluent areas. Their neighbour is Carl Howman, Jacko from the 1980s comedy Brushstrokes. In May 1998, 2 months before the first episode airs, the sitcom writer Jeff Dean said that Babes in the Wood will be the best new ITV sitcom since Rising Damp. Really? David Lidiment, ITV's director of programmes, was so confident of the show he had decided to produce a high-profile Christmas special even before viewers had seen the first episode. The programme was commissioned after a stern warning to ITV by the industry regulator, the Independent Television Commission, which issued broadcasting licences to ITV companies. The ITC concluded in its 1998 annual review that ITV had failed to develop good new comedy. 1 year later, the Independent Television Commission criticised the network for relying too much on tried and tested winning formulas and not creating enough fresh and exciting programmes. It specifically cited Babes in the Wood that was said to have failed to live up to the faith ITV had shown in it. The episode synopses are not very inspiring, mostly concerning the girls' boyfriends, trying to get a boyfriend and general domestic disagreements between the girls. It was advertised as post-Watershed, but the language, far from being vulgar or obscene, was childish, more like playground teasing than grown-up full-letter obscenities. In 2013, Digital Spy reported that Denise Van Outen blamed critics for ruining her comedy career chances. She said, "Critics said I couldn't act as I was a big breakfast host, but some of it was funny." So, at least, it seems, she was acknowledging that most of it wasn't funny, a view shared by Digital Spy, who included the show in their list of the UK's 5 worst sitcoms. In a retrospective of the best and worst of ITV for The Guardian, Stuart Heritage wrote, "The late 1990s. Every television channel in the world is looking for the new friends. ITV comes up with Babes in the Wood, a show where some babes live in St John's Wood and literally nothing else happens." The Rough Guide to British Cult Comedy included it in their list of the 10 worst TV comedies ever and called it hackneyed, looking decidedly jaded by this point in comedy history. In 2005, satellite channel UK TV Gold commissioned a group of scientists led by Dr Helen Pilcher to study 20 years of British sitcoms. Babes in the Wood scored 8 out of 1,120 points, putting the show in second from last position. In The Independent, Robert Hanks appeared to praise Denise Van Outen. She dominates the action without much effort. Some reviews of the series praised her acting. In fact, she doesn't act at all, but she has the rarer talent of seeming completely herself in front of the camera. This gift is worth nothing, though, when she has to put across a sequence of poisonously stupid lines. In January 2006, Channel 4 aired a documentary titled Who Killed the Sitcom, about how various influences contributed to the decline of the sitcom. It was written and presented by David Lidiment. Freelance media journalist Rob Buckley reviewed the programme. He noted that there were obvious gaps in Lidiment's coverage of sitcom history, whether for personal or political reasons. For instance, none of the shockingly bad sitcoms that have graced our airwaves over the years, such as ITV's Babes in the Wood, were mentioned as potential devaluers of the sitcom currency. Buckley then reminded readers that the idea that anyone in charge of the networks, such as Lidiment, may have been responsible for the demise of the sitcom was entirely overlooked. Perhaps ITV realised early on in the run of the show that it was a bit of a dud, despite commissioning a second series for 1999, that the first series was released on video within months of being shown, even before the Christmas special aired. High Street Blues was a short-lived sitcom series produced by London Weekend Television for ITV, broadcast from January to February 1989. It was written by Jimmy Perry and Robin Carr, who also directed. The High Street in question is actually a row of shops that are in the way of plans for a supermarket chain wanting to demolish them to build a new store. To get the shopkeepers out, the tough, no-nonsense managing director of Waverley's, the supermarket chain, Shirley Dixon, is prepared to use any means, fair or foul. Chesney Black, played by Ron Pember, runs a junk shop and would sell his grandmother to make a quick profit. He's keen to sell to the supermarket at the right price. Rita Franks, played by Valerie Walsh, is a glamorous, well-dressed florist in her 40s. She'll sell her thriving business if the price is right. Mavis Drinkwater, played by Elizabeth Stewart, owns the wool shop, which has been in her family for as long as anyone can remember. Charlie McPhee, played by Phil McCall, is the dour old Scot who runs the Cobblers, which was run by his father before him. He refuses to sell because the shop is really a little gold mine. Critics and audiences found it completely devoid of humour or entertainment. What few jokes there were fell flatter than a pancake. Perry later admitted that he only pitched the series to LWT because he badly needed the money, and he felt it was one of his worst attempts at a sitcom ever devised, saying there was nothing the actors could do with it. It lasted for a single series of 6 episodes, after which Perry teamed up with Croft again for the far more popular You Rang the Lord. The Radio Times Guide to TV Comedy lists High Street Blues at number 11 in the 20 worst British sitcoms list. Mark Lewison described the series as pitiful and the laughs as woefully thin on the ground. The reviewer for The Stage said, whether the blame can be attributed to a rash of overacting or the fact that the characters being introduced are almost wearing labels around their necks announcing their individual personalities, this new sitcom is below standard. The Daily Mirror was kinder. Cheap-looking comedy with a largely unknown cast, but it's cheerful enough, harmless, and I've seen a lot worse. 2 weeks later in the television listings section, the Daily Mirror stated, comedy series about little shopkeepers battling against a big business. A modern enough theme, but the style is well whiskered. A syndicated article appearing in many regional newspapers said, High Street Blues is one of those which is so mind-bogglingly dreadful that it's hard to know where to begin. One viewer wrote, it is hard to believe that anyone would go to all the expense and trouble of filming rubbish like High Street Blues, let alone inflict it on television viewers. It was certainly the poorest comedy series that I've ever seen. The Coventry Evening Telegraph said, if there's ever an advert for out-of-town shopping centres, it's the pedestrian comedy High Street Blues. Naff scripts spouted by stereotyped characters. Jimmy Perry proved several times over that he was never as successful writing sitcoms without David Croft as he was writing them with Croft, and perhaps the lowest point of his solo career was High Street Blues, despite whatever was contributed by co-writer Robin Carr. The series does not seem to have been released on DVD or VHS. Originally, this show was going to be titled Everything I Know About Men, which might have been better than According to Bex, which on balance might sound conceited. The fact is that Bex, Jessica Stevenson, now known as Jessica Hines, is frustrated trying to figure out what a woman is supposed to do in a world where men behave like men. She realises the more she learns about men, the more infuriating they become. The BBC press office announcement promoting the show concentrated on the seedier side of her on-off relationships, the boyfriend who thinks he's just there to make a baby, and Bex's womanising father, who is as laddish as the much younger men. Bex has a Bridget Jones complex. She thinks she is fat, almost a size 10, 12, and goes out with men with questionable standards so she can feel better about herself. But inevitably, that's a hopeless strategy. While it may be your bête noire, according to Bex writer Fred Barron went on to create My Family. Dr. Helen Pilcher's assessment gave, according to Bex, 67 out of 1,120, putting in fourth from bottom place. The Stage called it the biggest sitcom disaster of the year. Sam Wollaston, writing for The Guardian, said, according to Bex, a waste of the talents of Jessica Stevenson, who plays the lead, but it did manage to use the phrase moisture retention, which for some reason is quite funny. The British Comedy Guide described it as dull and predictable. David Norman, writing for the Clandestine Critic website, said, according to Bex, isn't funny. Jess plays Rebecca, aka Bex, a PA for some poorly defined media-type company. She has a boyfriend, a sex-mad dad, rubbish bosses, and does occasional straight-to-camera bits, but as separate bits from the rest of the show. Jessie's good, but it doesn't look like she's trying, as if she realises it's not that good. At the end of January 2005, the Chortle website pointed out that after 4 episodes it was not just Bex doing badly for the BBC in ratings on Friday nights. Bob Mortimer's Panel Game, 29 Minutes of Fame, and Dom Jolly's World Shut Your Mouth had both lost viewers over several weeks. 1 month after Bex ended, the first episode of The Two Ronnies sketchbook was aired, bringing nearly 8 million viewers to BBC One. This is more than twice the audience that Bex or 29 Minutes of Fame achieved in the BBC One 9 till 10 p.m. slot on a Friday. There was a lot of talk at the time of the death of the sitcom, which coincided with the announcement that Peter Fincham would be the successor to Lorraine Heggessey as controller of BBC One. He was expected to make comedy, and sitcom in particular, his first priority. In his first full year in charge, there was a year-on-year growth in the channel's audience share, but he only stayed 2 years, then went to ITV. Despite reports that a second series had been planned, the show was cancelled after the first series due to low ratings. Stevenson considered the show so bad she quit her agent. There has not been a commercial DVD release. A year later there was a short-lived American version on CBS called Courting Alex that starred Jenna Elfman, best known for being in 90s sitcom Dharma and Greg. It was a flop over there as well. Abbey was a sitcom pilot made by Baby Cow Productions for ITV. The show was broadcast on the 14th of February 2007 with a view to a series if the one-off was popular. Spoofing the celebrity rehab centre The Priory, The Abbey was written by Morweena Banks, that's Mrs David Baddiel to you, as the place for celebrities to visit to overcome their problems. Banks stars as faded rock legend Marion Hope, who had a very public breakdown and opened the Abbey as a retreat offering New Age therapies. Omar Dajili plays slimy manager Tony, with a slew of well-known performers playing a variety of personalities and public figures trying to give up various vices. Russell Brand is a DJ, seemingly nonchalant about his addiction. Liz Smith is a sex-addicted pensioner. Tasmin Edgerton plays a model with an eating disorder, and Miranda Hart is the wife of a disgraced MP who wants to end it all. Reece Shearsmith is a so-called doctor and counsellor. Then Wet frontman Marty Pellow turns up as Hope's estranged husband. Accomplished writer, great cast, renowned production company, it's bound to be a surefire hit. The episode gained an estimated 2.3 million viewers and somewhat poor reviews. Jane Simon reviewed the pilot in the Mirror. She started off with a bit of subtlety. The kindest thing you can say is that it's got a fabulous cast. OK, she continued, though it's not without laughs, some of the best coming from her tactless business partner, played by Omar Dajili. Its biggest failing is that, like Marianne herself, it ship sailed long ago. New Age therapies and self-obsessed celebs might have been ripe for sending up a decade ago, but the Abbey's targets are so broad you can practically see them from space. Coincidentally, Also on 14th of February 2007 was the annual Brits Award ceremony, televised live on ITV and hosted by Russell Brand. And while hosting the awards, he made several remarks relating to news stories of singer Robbie Williams entering rehabilitation for addiction to prescription drugs. Ironically, in the Abbey, Brand played a big-name DJ who couldn't see why there was any fuss about his crack addiction. A few days later, after Jane Simon's review in the Mirror reported on Brand's lacklustre efforts at the Brits and that Russell Brand's week got worse when he played an incorrigible junkie in TV's abysmal sitcom The Abbey, this one-off pilot could have been funny, but instead of sharply observed parody, the shabby plumped for self-indulgent, surreal slapstick. I've never laughed less. Meanwhile, The Guardian's Ewan Ferguson said, like James Morrison's music, new sitcom The Abbey was even worse than it sounded. Depressingly unfunny, given that it came from the pen of Morweena Banks. It raised no laughs anywhere in the country at all. Tellingly, the fact that Miranda Hart and Reece Shearsmith were in it failed to make it any better. Tellingly, the fact that Russell Brand was in it failed to make it any worse. The poor viewing figures and scathing reviews did not stop ITV commissioning a full series for broadcast on ITV2 in 2008. Perhaps they had some changes in mind. Filming was due to begin in January 2008, but the series was later cancelled. Some sources say it was due in part to cast unavailability issues. However, it's common to change a cast for a variety of reasons after a pilot, so that excuse seems a bit weak. There's not been a commercial DVD release. Father Figure was a sitcom that was broadcast on BBC One and in Ireland on RTE2 in September 2013. It followed a radio version that was first broadcast on BBC Radio 2 in April 2010 as part of Radio 2's Comedy Showcase. The 6-part series was written by Jason Byrne and directed by Nick Wood. It follows the everyday chaos of the White family. Tom White is a man who tries to be the best dad he can to his 2 sons while his wife works full-time, but his schemes and plans often descend into chaos and confusion. Overnight figures showed that the first episode was watched by 11.5% of the viewing audience of that time, with 1.37 million watching it. Subsequent episodes were watched by a similar number of viewers. Hannah Verdier in The Guardian wrote, a sitcom where the sit involves a man who, shock, horror, stays at home to look after his children while his wife goes to work. Imagine that. Unsurprisingly, the com here is severely lacking, unless you count skits about making cupcakes, vacuuming up Lego and drinking gin. The Telegraph reviewer, Michael Deacon, thought the entire White family had suffered some form of devastating trauma. He said, it's the only explanation for the way they behave. Plainly, these poor people were ill and in urgent need of help. However, Deacon supposed that there was a possibility that the falling over and fighting was meant to be slapstick. He dismissed this idea, saying, there's little, if any, logic. The characters just do irrational, silly, horrible and violent things. The Scotsman said, were it not for the sweary words and a few double entendre, it would be pitched firmly as family entertainment and has clearly been commissioned to try and catch in on the unexpected success of Mrs. Brown's Boys. The Custard TV website reviewer felt that the BBC had little confidence in Father Figure from the get-go, as it was broadcast in the post-10 o'clock news death slot. They said the show had plenty of problems, including one-note characters, a predictable script and gags you could see coming a mile off. Yet another addition to the list of poor sitcoms that have been produced in 2013. The Daily Express commented, I did laugh, just once, after which I continued to watch in horror. Harry Venning in The Stage said, Jason Byrne has a very endearing quality about him, which is just as well as his new sitcom Father Figure has precious little else going for it. The show seems to hover in a comedy limbo all of its own, somewhere between the conformity of My Family and the madness of The Mighty Boosh, the end result being messy and unfocused. Catherine G. of the Daily Telegraph gave it 1 out of 5 stars and said, We don't need our comedy to be plausible. What we need is for these implausible situations to be delivered with wit, brilliant timing and a superbly funny script. Father Figure failed on every count. Keith Watson in the Metro called Father Figure a mystifying misfire, continuing, Father Figure managed to commit every sitcom cliché crime in the book. Dopey bloke, interfering mother, long-suffering wife, victim neighbours, bonkers relatives. It's an unholy marriage of Some Mothers Do Have 'Em and Mrs Brown's Boys, with Byrne as an Irish spin on Frank Spencer, a hapless idiot to whom disasters naturally occur. The Irish Independent said, this was unabashed slapstick stuff. Within minutes, the action had degenerated into a succession of increasingly frantic pratfalls and custard pie gags, each of them less amusing than the one that had gone before. Byrne blamed the BBC for the poor viewing figures. He may have a point there. He said, we made it for families and they showed it to people at 10:30 at night. But a better broadcast time wouldn't have fixed the script. Byrne, however, had an answer. It needed a second series so we could fix all the bits and pieces. We were just creating it, but they buried it, he said. Whilst writing for television and radio are different disciplines, Byrne had made a radio version in 2010 that should have been some sort of guide. Regrettably, Byrne had fallen foul of the assumption that we get time to fix it. Since 1946, when the first sitcom was aired on BBC television, up to mid-2024, a total of 1,437 sitcoms were broadcast. Of those, 55.9% only had one series, with an average of 6 episodes. Having just one series is not an exception. Jason Byrne said TV execs are on the lookout for the next Brendan O'Carroll and they want instant success. It was hard to achieve that with a brand new sitcom. He was probably right. There was just one series of 6 episodes. It hasn't been repeated. The DVD was released just 5 days after the last episode was broadcast in October 2013. These were the 5 least funny sitcoms according to the media critics of the day and a few retrospective reviews. Clearly some people love these shows, but not enough to keep them on our screens for more than 1 or 2 series. Do you remember enjoying any of these shows? Did you agree with the critics? Let me know in the comments. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Give it a like and you can subscribe for more television sitcom videos. Thanks for watching.